Book Club, we're celebrating the start of Glen Innes's High Country Writers Festival. It's in its second year and it all kicks off with an author talk with Tamworth-based writer Yumna Kassab this weekend. Yumna joins us now. Hi, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a bit about yourself and your writing background. How long ago did you start writing more seriously?
So I remember actually writing as a child, but I'd say seriously, and by that I mean every single day, probably for about 17 years. And in that time there has been obviously a lot of rejections, but yeah, so I'd say probably about 17 years. So there's been a lot of stories written before this particular book.
Yeah, you're a teacher by day as well. What's that like navigating writing and those teaching commitments?
Well, I think as long as a person is pretty disciplined and has a sort of routine, it should be pretty doable. And I find that, for example, obviously the day is devoted to my work life, but the evenings are very much for the writing. And then the weekends and holidays, which teachers, obviously have a bit more of, I try and dedicate as much as possible to my writing.
Your debut book, The House of YOUSSEF, was listed on a couple of major literary prizes. Can you tell us about this collection of stories?
So it very much focuses on the lives of Lebanese migrants in Western Sydney, their fortunes and misfortunes. The wheels do fall off the bus in the title sequence, which is the second part of the book. But it's very, very much an exploration of their lives, their relationships, and the community itself.
Is this a personal story for you?
Not particularly, but obviously, my parents originally migrated from Lebanon, so it is a community that I'm very familiar with, and I've found since then, reflecting on the actual stories, that the idea of community and place is very important to my writing.
So how did you research this book? Where did you begin?
To be honest, there wasn't actually much research involved, and the first piece, Cigarettes and Smoke, which is the very first story in the book, and it was the very first story that I wrote in the collection, really did take me by surprise. And at the time, I was actually writing other projects, and pretty much all the stories in there were written in between other longer projects.
Okay, so how did you pull them together? Talk us through that process of culminating all of these stories.
Well, originally when I approached Giramondo, I sent them the stories in Motherland, which are the first part of the book. And when we were having a chat, my editor essentially said that the first part is quite short by itself for a book. And he asked, is there anything else that you have? And I thought that because it is already the theme of migrants and the community, I had already written the House of Yusuf stories, which were originally part of Motherland, but kept expanding. And then there was also Honing and Darkness Speak. And I suppose in many ways they're very much united by theme, and rather than an overarching story arc, it's mainly the theme that actually unites them in terms of the community and actually the place.
Let's talk a bit more about some of the stories. Why do you think that they were so important to tell and share?
I think storytelling generally and fiction broadly is very important and obviously resonates with people, and it allows us to not only move outside of ourselves, but the research does show that reading does improve people's empathy. And I think at the end of the day that much of literature and all the art is very much about reducing the disconnect and improving the bonds and connections between people. And I think in many ways, even though these stories are very much about migrants in Western Sydney, that there are many parallels with other communities and other people. And I do think that speaking to people in my immediate life who've actually read the stories, that they resonate with a whole different range of people. And the stories themselves are quite diverse, and I think it lends itself to that as well.
What's the reaction been to this book?
The reaction has been incredibly positive. I'm surprised sometimes by the stories that really resonate with people. I've got favourites. I think most people have their favourites, and as long as everyone doesn't necessarily like the same story, I think I've actually done quite well.
Yeah, that's a nice little way to look at it, isn't it? Now, of course, you are based in Tamworth, as I mentioned, but you are heading to the Glen Innes High Country Writers Festival. Tell me about the details and what you'll be discussing in your author talk.
My plan is to discuss the story, the actual book itself, and storytelling and pretty much writing process, and to, I suppose, answer any questions that people who've read the book actually have. My event is on Saturday, the 15th of August. I think it's around midday, and the details would be up on the High Country Writers Festival website.
Yumna, it's been great to talk to you today. What else is on the horizon for you writing-wise?
Hopefully, a few different projects. I'm currently writing something to be performed in Melbourne, and we'll see how that goes given the current lockdown in Melbourne. But yeah, I think the idea is to explore a few different things and to actually experiment.
Sounds like an awful lot of fun. Yumna, thank you very much for joining us on ABC New England Northwest, and all the best for your appearance at the Writers' Festival too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is Yumna Kassab there, who is from Tamworth. She's appearing at the High Country Writers Festival in Glen Innes. It's happening this Saturday. The festival, though, will continue through until October. We'll bring you more conversations from that over the coming weeks. If you want more details, highcountrywritersfestival.com is the place to go.